evening. This is my three-world presentation. Three worlds of Jesus. In the Gospels, I've chose Matthew 18:21 through 35, which is a parable about forgiveness. The literal meaning of the text in the Matthew is, the text reads that there was a king who lent money to his servants. And one day as he's going through the books, he's looks and finds this one servant that owes him a lot of money. So he calls for that servant to be brought to him, and he charges him like, hey, pay up. The servant couldn't pay him, so the king said, okay. He ordered that the servant, his family, possessions, everything were sold. Well, when the servant pleaded with him and said, please give me some time, be merciful, then the king said, okay, and he forgave his debt. So the servant walked off, and then soon after, he seen another servant who owed him money, and started demanding it and grabbing the guy by the throat. When the guy said, when he pleaded to give him more time to repay, the ungrateful servant put the man in prison until he could pay. And then others saw this, and they went back and told the king. The king then called the servant back and rebuked him, being unforgiving of the debt, and put him in prison. At the end of the parable, Christ says, this is how the Heavenly Father will do to us if we do not forgive others in our hearts. That's the literally what it read as. Part of the historical world, there wasn't much I could really put in there, but what I got from the Noab Bible, from the historical perspective, the money that was owed from the unforgiving servant was 10,000 talents. 1 talent was equal to 6,000 denarii, and 1 denarius was worth a day's wage. So you gotta imagine, he owed 6,000 days of work. Comparing to the money owed by the other servant, which was only 100 denarii, which is about 3 months worth of work. Back then, slaves were part of life at that time. They were property, and including their family possessions, they're all considered chattel. The message is basically, the history behind this is, if you owed, you either paid what you could, or you could very well, your whole family could end up paying for you. In this case, he was forgiven. That's historically how it was back then. You could either be forgiven by the debtor, or the debtee would have to pay everything back, or you can go to prison until you're able to pay it back. And then, as far as the contemporary world, for us today, the message in the parable is still forgiveness. It's that of forgiveness, as well as reaping what you sow. Because when he did not forgive that other servant for the 100 denarii, he was sowing bad seed, and he ended up reaping it, because they went back and told the king. Other servants went back and told the king, and then the king brought him back. For us today, that would be like the moral is to forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Currently, we got creditors, and they can collect from us, but even after 7 years, they have to forgive the debt. And it's not just about forgiving, but it's also about being grateful for God's forgiveness. And remember that when others have done us wrong, we got to remember we have done others wrong too, and God forgave us for that. We could all benefit from forgiving others in the big picture. And we'll have to be accountable for our words and our deeds. Just like at the end of that parable when Christ explains, this is how our Heavenly Father will do unto us if we do not forgive. We have to be able, in our world today, especially in our world today, not forgive once or twice, but be very forgiving all the time, because it it just makes sense. Like from back then to now,